What's up, guys, and happy morning or evening wherever you are. Today we're in the reptile room to talk about leopard gecko genetics. Okay, so let's start it off with what would be considered a normal leopard gecko. So this is what a normal leopard gecko looks like. It's pretty like brownish, yellowish with spots all over it, hence the nickname leopard gecko that was given to it. It kind of looks and resembles a leopard a little bit. You can see those prints right there on its head. There's a nice eyeball shot. Really cool, like marbly looking eyes. And this is pretty much your standard leopard gecko. When they were pretty much first imported into the United States, this is what they look like. Now, they're not really being imported right now because they come from the Middle East. And as I'm sure you can figure out, there's a lot of tension right now between the United States and the Middle East. So what we have in captivity is pretty much what we are working with. But slowly but surely, some unique traits and genetic mutations started to form with these guys and be discovered. And now it has blown up into a whole hobby of wonderful, creative morphs, which is partly why I like the name Geeky Gecko Creations for my business name, because you as a leopard gecko breeder have the ability to create color and pattern, sometimes even size, and that's called mutation or morphs or genetics. Okay, branching off from the normal, let's go to what I would consider to be the number one most messed around with trait in leopard gecko hobby, albinism. So you can see with albinism, starting with the eyes, there's a lot more red blood vessels that can be seen. You can also notice there is no black pigment on this gecko. So albinism removes all the black pigment from an animal, pretty much. I mean, you can still see, some in the inners of the eyes, some lines in the eyes, the pupil, obviously. But for the most part, it's going to remove all of the black patterning and base color that would have, and spotting that would have been in this gecko. And the black patterning with the black pigment removed, what does the color turn into? Brown, yellow. That will be like your base albino gecko will look like this. Just a quick historical context, leopard gecko's scientific name actually means eyelid gecko because they actually have the ability to close their eyes, as you saw her beginning to, yep, right there. Not every gecko can do that. Similar to the Gecko gecko you see on commercials, they can't do that. They just lick their eyes clean. Crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, they also lick their eyes clean. But leopard geckos are in the family that allows for their eyes to actually close. So on a side note, I wanted to show you something called a paradox. On the very tip of this gecko's nose, you could see what appears to be a darker or more blacker spot. This is an albino gecko. You can see that there's no dark pigment inside of this gecko. It has the light colored eyes with the red lines like we previously discussed. But what is this black spot on its nose? In the reptile industry or hobby, this is often referred to as paradox because the word means odd, or basically it should not happen, or we don't know how it happened. And so in the world of genetics, obviously genetics came about by the confusion of genes, making things come out that maybe necessarily shouldn't have come out, or, the statistical odds of them coming out are very low. Similar to like blue eyes in humans. The brown eye gene is much more common. So to get blue eyes in human beings, you need two human beings that have the blue-eyed gene inside of them, which not a lot of people do comparatively to the whole world. So in genetics, it is basically a scrambling of the genes where it mixes the genes to create something new or different. The paradox spot goes against that scrambling. It's confusion. This gecko should have no black pigment, yet it has a black spot on its nose. That is confusing. Okay, so let's move on to one of the most popular traits or morphs in leopard geckos. This is called the snow trait. Gene or morph. All of those words are pretty much used interchangeably in the reptile hobby. It is not an albino, so you can see that there's no red veins in the eyes. But what is different about this gecko than what you saw in the very first normal leopard gecko? Well, you can see where there was black patterning in like black banding or striping or patterning in the normal leopard gecko, this one has a little bit more purple. This one appears a little bit more faded or washed out, sort of like a mini snowstorm. Hence the name snow. These leopard geckos are called snow leopard geckos. Now they're all the same species, but it is different genetic mutations that happens within the DNA structure of this animal to cause different physical traits to be shown. So there's an up-close shot of the skin of this animal, and you can see it's just beautiful. And this is why the snow is one of the most common genetic morphs or traits worked with in the leopard gecko hobby. Okay, now by the looks of it, you might think that this leopard gecko trait is related to the last one. But this is called a blizzard leopard gecko. It's actually a completely different mutation that happens in leopard geckos called the blizzard gene or the blizzard trait. And what it does is it actually washes out all of the pattern of the animal, and you can see it gives it a nice purplish hue. Pretty cool in my opinion. It's one of the leopard gecko morphs that is easy to duplicate or to recreate, so it's pretty popular. It's worked with a lot and combined with other genes to create some really cool combinations. But it was one of my favorites when I first got into leopard geckos. I was just amazed at the lack of pattern, the color. I just thought it was so cool. So again, this is the blizzard gene. Okay, let's do a 180 and talk about some brightness here. Look at this leopard gecko. Looks similar to the pattern of a normal leopard gecko, but it's much, much brighter. Look at how the orange pops, the green on his head, even the yellow is very vivid and bright. This genetic trait is called the white and yellow gene. As you can see, the yellow pops, and it has typically a lot more higher white on the sides of his body. The white of the belly of the gecko will oftentimes move higher and higher towards the shoulders of the animal, which just creates a little bit more of a like a two-tone look, where it's very white underneath and that white creeps up high onto the gecko's body. And then the color that is on top of the gecko is just so, so vivid and bright. Beautiful, beautiful gene, mutation, genetic. And you can actually see that the the veins in this one's eyes are actually kind of reddish. Now this guy is actually carrying one copy of the albino gene. So at the end of this video, we're going to go over what happens when you mix genes, what happens when you mix an albino with a white and yellow, or an albino with a snow. We're going to go over that later. But for now, you can see that in albinism, the gecko would not be showing any black pigment. So what is going on here with this guy? He clearly has black pigment. Why would he be carrying the albino gene? Well, to be a fully displaying albino, you need 2 copies of the gene. One from your mom, one from your dad. Again, similar to blue eyes in parents. One parent cannot just pass on to you the blue eye gene. Both parents have to pass it on for you to have blue eyes. So similar with leopard geckos, to be a true 100% albino, both parents have to pass on a copy of the albino gene. With this guy, only one of his parents passed on a copy of the albino gene, making him what we call in the industry het, or carrying for albinism. Okay, sticking with the side of color, I'm sure you're wowed by this right from the start. And this is a beautiful example of what we call in the industry a tangerine leopard gecko. Tangerine leopard gecko is actually not an inward genetic mutation. It's not necessarily a mutation as so much as it is a combination of the displaying colors of the parents. Let me give an example in human beings. If you take a tall human being, I was going to say breed them with a small human being. That's not the right terminology. If a tall human has a baby with a short human, the children will most likely be about medium size. If a short human has a baby with a short human, they'll most likely be short. But what happens when you have a tall father have a baby with a tall mother? What's going to happen to the height of the children? Most likely the children are all going to be tall or taller than average. And that's what happened with this genetic trait here. Let's not call it a mutation. It's not necessarily a mutation like albinism is an actual mutation. It's going to sound weird, but similar to like the blue eyes trait as well, the normal is brown. The blue eyes is unique. Now, blue eyes are wonderful. They're great. I'm just saying on a genetic level, it's a mutation. It's something that was deviated from the normal, which is cool because that allows for lots of different patterning, color creation. So now that we got that out of the way, going back to the height thing, this gecko is similar to a tall father in humans having a baby with a tall mother and their children becoming tall, where over the years, certain geckos displayed more hues or patterns of orange. Well, what happens when you breed those geckos that show more orange with each other? So you take a male leopard gecko that has more orange than normal, and you take a female leopard gecko that's displaying more orange than normal. And what do you create? You create babies that are displaying more orange than even the parents displayed. So that's how this genetic trait came about. It's called line breeding. It's not necessarily mutation breeding, but it is line breeding, where you take the qualities in a certain animal that you're looking for and you breed it back to its offspring for a few generations. And the result of what you get is higher and higher display of the very trait that was first discovered in the parents. Okay, so this is the last base or morph type that we're going to talk about. And what I mean by base is that once certain traits or mutations were discovered, such as the white and yellow we went over, such as albino, people started combining those traits together to create even more beautiful animals and genetic mutation combinations. So this is the last one of the base features that we're going to talk about. And then we will cover combinations of what, what things look like when you combine them together. So all the other combinations prior to this have mainly been pattern changes. And this one does offer pattern changes as well, this mutation. But in addition to that, it offers a change in the eyes. This guy's making me nervous right now. Oh, no, 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 no. He's shaking his tail. Oh, you know what it is? Okay, Buddy. Look, he's marking his territory. His name is actually Buddy. Okay, let me say this. He is the sweetest. He is the sweetest male gecko that I have. However, when they get into breeding mode, they can get kind of defensive and aggressive. And although their bite is not the worst, it is something that will make you bleed and possibly not stop bleeding for a while because their little teeth are pretty sharp. So it kind of cuts through like the first layer of, the skin and everything like that. And I'm not trying to go through that right now. So as soon as I felt him shaking, I was like, what's going on? Oh, I thought I felt him shaking. I knew what it was now. So he smells the female that has been on my hand. And that's why he was looking like he was going to bite me. And that's part of their breeding behavior. They'll kind of bite a little bit on the females. So take a look at my breeding video if you're interested in breeding. I'll put a link to it here in the top right corner. And you can kind of see what breeding looks like. But as you can see, he can't really differentiate too much the difference between my hand and a female. They're very scent-based. So let me kind of just touch him a little bit to kind of deter him, move him around a little to kind of deter him from breeding behavior. Now, like I said, he's very sweet. I love this boy. He's never given me problems, but he is a big guy. And if he was to clamp down on me, I don't think he would do it hard because they don't usually bite the females like aggressively or defensively. But a defensive bite from a leopard gecko can definitely do a little bit of cutting and damage. So we want to avoid that today. What I want to show you with this guy is his eyes. That is a good shot. Every other genetic trait we've covered so far right now did not affect the level of shading in the eyes. But this gene, called the Eclipse gene, does two things. Number one, you are going to see an effect of shading on the eyes. This is what's called 50-50. Snake eyes, sometimes they call it. It is where the whole eyeball will be covered by half shading and the other half will be normal, as you can see right there. In a full eclipse leopard gecko, the complete eye will be shaded in dark and black, just like his half eye is right there. And in some cases, the other variation is a low form of shading, which kind of comes in a little bit scrambled, speckled, if you will. The shading will be kind of on one section of the eye, maybe like a quarter of the eye or the bottom half of the eye or the top half of the eye, or just like one small little spot on the eye that will have some extra shading to it. That's the first effect. The second effect, as you can see, he doesn't quite look normal pattern. He's a little bit more washed out or faded out, like the pattern is faded out. And that's also what you get with the Eclipse gene. It washes the color out a little bit. It actually makes the color a little bit more, a little bit lighter, number one. So think of shades. You know, this guy's actually fairly good color yellow, but sometimes what happens is the shade of coloring will lighten up, so the yellow will become a little bit duller and the pattern will wash out a little to where it doesn't have as much blotching. So you could see with this guy, he's pretty like speckled, right? But he's not as blotched as a lot of the other geckos patternings where they would have big black spots all over them. What happens with the Eclipse Gene is it kind of washes out some of those black spots, some of that patterning, and gives it a little bit more of a less pattern look, as well as it messes with the eyes and different combinations of the eyes. So this is the Eclipse Gene. And we're going to put this guy back before he thinks my whole arm is a female. Okay, so guess what, guys? It actually turned out to be a lot of content to post a video of the base morphs plus the combination morphs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a completely separate video of just the combination morphs. That will allow me to take a little bit more time with that video, especially since there's so much diversity that you can really get into. I hope you enjoyed this base morphs video, and please stay tuned for the combination morphs, which I think you will enjoy even more if that's possible. Like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.